I replaced my clip-ons with a comfort kit or handlebar risers. Whilst the clip-ons are excellent for track use, I did find them uncomfortable after a couple of hours on the road. So going for long social rides can be quite painful with the clip-ons. That's not the same for everybody. I have seen people that can go all day on clip-ons, but I found them quite uncomfortable. This option gives me the performance of a superbike with the comfort of a sports naked bike. You could argue that Sports Naked could do the same. The only thing I found is that Sports Naked can fall a little bit short when it comes to track use. For example, they don't get the clearances that you'll get on a super sports bike, so you can't get the same lean angles. Typically with the Sports Naked, their suspension is not fully adjustable. Now that's not on all models. Some of the high-end models do have fully adjustable suspension, or some of the newer models, but the older models have only partially adjustable suspension, and in some cases, if any. The other thing is the Sports Nakeds, obviously they don't have the fairings to give you the wind protection down the straight, and typically you can't get the top end speed you're going to get on a super sports bike because they're geared for low end torque. Now, in saying that, I take nothing away from Sports Naked bikes. They do hold their own, and in many ways can be better for road use than a super sports bike. But I've just found that this is the best compromise for road and track use. Now, there are some trade-offs. It's not all perfect. Initially, when you ride the bike with a comfort kit, it will feel strange. You may not even like it, but you will get used to it quite quickly. And once you get used to it, any initial doubts you may have will certainly go away. The second point to note is the look of the bike. It does change. It looks more of a street fighter rather than a super sports bike, but as long as you don't mind that, then that should be fine. Next point to note is that the windshield is lifted up to allow clearance for the steering at full lock. It's lifted up by these brackets here that are inserted between the fairing and the windshield. Now what that does is that it does put stress on the fairings, and you do have to stretch them back on. There's also a little bit of a gap where the fairings come together. Now, even though the windshield's been lifted, at full lock the bar still does touch onto the windscreen. It's only a little bit and nothing to really worry about. You can adjust that out if you want to by lowering the bar, as the bar does have a little bit of adjustment on it, but I chose not to, as it defeats the purpose of having a riser bar if you just lower it. The fifth point I want to make is that the stock mirrors that come with a super sports bike are not effective once you put on the riser bar, and that's because the only thing you can see in them with the riser bar is just your arms. They just get right in the way. So you need to make an alternative arrangement of put bar end mirrors on the riser bar. They're not on there at the moment, but that's what I'm using, and they work quite good. One of the last things I want to mention is that on this bike, the steering angle is reduced, and that's because at full lock, the bar riser does hit onto the damper, and it doesn't allow for the bar to fully lock. So that means that you can't actually lock the bike with the key, or lock the steering with the key, as it doesn't allow it to go to full lock position. It doesn't make any difference when you're riding, so when you're riding it's all well and good, you won't know it, doesn't affect anything on that side of things. The only other time it is notable is when you're trying to park in a tight spot. You'll have to move the bike backwards and forwards a few more times to get it in there because the steering angle is reduced. Now these shortcomings do apply to this model specifically, which is a Honda 2005 CBR 1000RR. They may not apply to your model, as each model is different. Overall, the experience is really good. Once you try this, you'll probably never want to go back onto clip-ons for road riding. It is much easier to ride. The bike dips into the corners really easily, and it's much more comfortable.